Oh, well, thank you very much, Ellen. And thank you all for joining the presentation. My name is Clinton Devereaux, Director of Solutions Engineering here at AireSpring. And as Ellen mentioned before, we have some exciting information relative to SD-WAN that we'd like to share with you all. And hopefully this will be some good salient information that'll provide you with some sales enablement and help you to better perform your jobs and to build your business with. So we have an outline. It is always an outline. Won't spend too much time on this thing, but you can see here that we have an agenda. So if you could just go ahead and browse, do that really quickly. I'll move on to the next slides. Full disclosure, folks, we sell various versions of SD-WAN. We sell them in sort of a tiered approach. You see VMware, Fortinet, Cisco, Meraki. Full disclosure, we sell a lot of the VMware product, more so than the others. And this presentation is geared upon the architecture. It's going to focus on the architecture of the VMware solution more so than the others. But a lot of the terminology that you will hear during the presentation is relevant across all SD-WAN solutions. All right, so where did this all start? There's always a slide about entomology, right? Where did it come from? Well, if you didn't know, SD-WAN comes from the concept of software-defined networking. And SDN is a network architecture model that adds a level of abstraction or separation to the functions of network devices that exist in the data center, such as switches, routers, bare metal servers, etc., and to help manage them globally and coherently, right? So some of the examples of software-defined networking that you may be familiar with are VMware NSX, any tickles to the ear, Cisco's DNA Center, any tickles to the ear, and IBM Cloud, probably a lot at that point. Now, businesses have steadily migrated to the cloud, right? Searching for quickly scalable infrastructures that cloud service providers took the care to build and manage, right? The above mentioned. And those network infrastructure capabilities, in addition to a strong virtualization approach, were the key drivers to consider software-defined networking as a principal building block of a wholly software-defined data center infrastructure using what's called NFV, or network function virtualization, which is just another way of saying replaces network appliances and hardware with virtual machines. So, oh boy. So, SD-WAN delivers a wide area network that connects multiple LANs with each other, making it in some ways a software-defined network in a WAN. We've come a long way. SD-WAN is built to support WANs that are spread out over a sizable geographic area. LAN protocols are distinguished by their capability to efficiently deliver data over shorter distances, such as a few hundred feet, through various mediums such as copper, right? We've all heard of Cat5, Cat6. A lot of that's LAN nomenclature for the most part. SD-WAN must be able to work over any medium, right, as compared to SDN, and is distinguished by its ability to deliver data securely and efficiently between global distances, not over LAN, not within the same area, but between global distances and destinations. Now, to achieve performance, some vendors choose mashups of various existing technologies, while others have quite literally created their own. And through the investigation of different SD-WAN vendors, you've probably seen that flow versus packet-based. You've probably heard my boss, Dr. Cloud, talk about the differences between the two. So the primary difference between software-defined networking and software-defined wide area networking is software-defined networking focuses inward on the LAN, or the service provider network within the data center, right? It is programmable and customizable, right, like SD-WAN. It's enabled by, but it's all enabled primarily by network function virtualization, meaning that the majority of the elements are virtualized. All those things we talked about earlier, the switches and edges, routers and things like that, are all virtualized, right? And then the SDN solution, usually the solution within the data center, is designed by you, the user. So if you went to Equinix and said, hey, I need software-defined network, and they'll say, okay, here you go. here's your NSX, your vCenter, and go at it, right? Not a good look, and probably not a good feeling, right? When you have a business to run and you're not really interested in learning this technology to the nth degree. The difference is that SD-WAN focuses on geographically distributed networks. That's a huge difference. It's not relying on LAN protocols, right? It requires protocols that can address the complications of communicating across long distances, right? So it focuses on geographically distributed networks. It's pre-programmed, right? It's always pre-programmed. We ship you the boxes out and you get them, you plug them in, and voila, right? So that makes it, by virtue of that, much less complex. Now, SD-WAN allows for network function virtualization integration as well, though you can't. You can run edges and various aspects of the SD-WAN architecture on virtual machines. Yes, you can, but integration with network function virtualization is more scalable with SD-WAN. You can actually integrate SD-WAN with NFV versus NFV being the foundation by which SD-WAN runs on. And routing can be run virtually, right? It can be run virtually in the cloud or via an SD-WAN device, right? So you can do it physically and virtually. And SD-WAN is configured by the vendor, right? So less work, less administrative overhead. And it's also got flexible network integration, right? Because SD-WAN can also integrate with VPNs, right? To access what are called non-SD-WAN destinations, and can use SD-WAN to connect to them. Right, so we've come a long way. So the edge, what is the edge? The edge is everything, is the thing that everyone sees. The edge is that device that goes into the customer location that is used to connect to the customer local area network. The edge is basically an appliance. It can be virtual, or it can be a hardware appliance as well. And speaking particularly about the VMware solution, the edges are scaled from small to big, and they all have differences in I/O features and such. So the edge basically is what's deployed at the customer prim, and is sort of like I'll say gateway, but it's the on-ramp. It's the on-ramp to the SD-WAN, right? That's what it is. And whenever you're considering edges, you have to, because they come in various sizes, you have to make sure you're sizing the edges to meet the requirements of the application. A lot of times what I see as an engineer, I see folks trying to size these things based on not on the application, but they go to the edge and size it without understanding more about what it's supposed to support. That's a cart before the horse sort of approach, and is not recommended. You always want to size the edge based on the application. That information has to come first, and then you size the edge based on that. So what does the edge do? Well, the edge does a lot of different things. When you place the edge at the customer prim, and then you plug the connections, the internet connections into it, which can be just about anything: fiber, LTE, MPLS, broadband, dedicated, point-to-point circuits, doesn't matter, right? The edge does a lot of different things. It does bandwidth discovery, right? By sending short packet bursts of bidirectional traffic and then measuring the received rate at each end. Now, how it can do this is because the mother by which all of these edges communicate with, these mothers actually, because they're the fabric of them existing all throughout the internet, and they're located geographically in geographically different locations. The edge seeks out the closest one, and because that gateway exists on the edge of the internet, can then give you real good statistics, right, as far as what the ping rate is and everything on the connection, right? It also does continuous path monitoring by performing continuous unidirectional measurements of performance metrics like loss, latency, and jitter of every single packet on every tunnel, right, between any two SD-WAN endpoints, edge, or gateway, right? Dynamic application steering, which allows it has a thing in it called business policy, which allows you to identify traffic coming to the edge from layers 2 through 7, right? VLAN, IP address protocol, and application. And the edge performs an application-aware per packet steering, right? Based on the business policy configuration and real-time link conditions. So there's a lot of intelligence that the edge brings to the table, right? Bandwidth aggregation, right? That's the thing everybody goes, ooh, I want to link my connections together, right? So it does that too, right? By performing per packet load balancing. And that's what you've heard Dr. Cloud talk about on many of his SD-WAN boot camps, per packet, right? Versus flow, right? And how and exclusively the VMware solution has what's called a hitless failover capability. So when you have multiple links, you have multiple tunnels going out over multiple links. If one link fails, that one tunnel goes down, but then all that traffic then goes over the available tunnel in a way that is at no cost, right, to the flow. Flow just continues, right? So bandwidth aggregation, and that's one of the benefits within that protected tunnel that you get. Then link steering and remediation, right? Which is basically a bunch of metrics that are measured and performed on the loops that learn the whole bunch of things like, it learns the applications, business priority of the apps, and the link cost, which is basically how long is it going to take this application to get from me to the other end as compared to the other paths, right? And it delivers a sub-second blackout and brownout protection, right, to improve application availability and remediates link degradation using FEC, it's called forward error correction, and activating jitter buffering, right, and synthetic packet reproduction, right? So this thing actually will look at packets that are missing, right, from the sending end and then reproduce them on the receiving end, right? Lots of great technology involved in the edge. And that's what that thing does. So the orchestrator, right? What's the orchestrator and what does it do? Well, the orchestrator is exactly what it sounds like. It is an orchestrator. It is that interface between the end user and the SD-WAN, by virtue of which allows the end user to manage and administrate that SD-WAN. It's basically your knobs and dials, right? It's the curtain behind the it's the man behind the curtain kind of thing. And you can go in there and it provides you with centralized visibility and administration of your SD-WAN and all the devices that are associated with that SD-WAN. So this is great vision. I wouldn't confuse this with an NMS because you get a heck of a whole lot more information from the orchestrator than you do from most network management systems, right? The orchestrator gives you the ability to look into your SD-WAN and orchestrate the data flow through the cloud network you created for yourself, or that we created for you. So what does the orchestrator do? Well, it gives you and AireSpring, because we co-administrate the orchestrator, but it gives you the power. It puts power in your hands. It gives you agency where you may not have had it before, and it does it in a way that allows you. It's I had to tell you, when I have SD-WAN here at home, my wife actually can configure SD-WAN policies. She got really good at it, right? And she's a social worker. But I say that to say that the GUI, or the graphical user interface, is very easy to comprehend and use. And there's tons of public information out there available to help you learn how to use it and to walk through it. But it gives you the ability to monitor, test, and troubleshoot and configure your SD-WAN. You can see all those other bullet points below each one of those points. But that's a lot of control, and it's not limited to the bullet points you see on this slide. Right, so the orchestrator gives you a lot of capability as an end user that you probably didn't have before with your usual WAN solution. The gateway. So a lot of people are probably getting closer to their screens right now. The gateway. What does that thing do? Everybody talks about it. What does it do? Well, the gateway basically is it's a very important component of the VMware SD-WAN architecture. The gateway, for the most part, and my guy Chuck Long, probably one of the smartest guys I know, said that, look, the gateway basically is a piece of software that provides the SD-WAN topology to the edges and reflects the routing topology of the overall SD-WAN. Done. And I went, wow, that is pretty much it in a nutshell, right? If you wanted a global explanation of what the SD-WAN gateway does, that's pretty much what it does. It does more by virtue of being that. Right, but it's also should be considered the on-ramp, right? The gateway is the sanctioned on-ramp, or the sanctioned part of the SD-WAN VeloCloud architecture, right? VMware architecture that allows you to get off of that secure SD-WAN that we've created, right? And allows you to then route that traffic to what are called NSDs, or non-SD-WAN destinations, and then also to destinations within AireSpring, within the diaspora of AireSpring services and products, right? SIP trunking, right? mobility by virtue of the gateway, right? Multi-Cloud Connect, which is a dedicated on-ramp to sanctioned cloud destinations, right? And it's dedicated for you, right? So your SD-WAN up to a dedicated connection to multi-cloud and on to Google Cloud and on to AWS, right? That's exciting. Network-based firewalls, AirPBX, and all of those features that sort of go across the AireSpring diaspora of services. But then again, like I said before, and to destinations beyond the SD-WAN, and to destinations beyond. So the gateway is a very important component of the SD-WAN architecture. But again, I like to reemphasize, the SD-WAN, the gateway is also the thing that all of the edges basically connect to, right? When they're plugged in, they try to find this gateway and then get their topologies, right? Because that's where all of the direction, right? All of the direction as far as how they should connect and what they should do is kept, so that when they do connect to the internet, they seek out their gateways, and the gateways then download all of that beautiful information to them, and they form their topologies and run, right? Now the underlay, the underlay is a beautiful thing, right? It really is just a concept of, it's a concept of what does the SD-WAN use to build itself upon, right? It needs something. You always have to have a foundation whenever you build anything. And that's pretty much what the underlay is. It's a concept of what the SD-WAN builds itself over. If you think about it, you can say the SD-WAN, the underlay is pretty much the accumulation of all the fiber, LTE, MPLS, broadband, wireless connections you plug into it. And the SD-WAN appliance says, okay, guys, you're my underlay. And it uses them all. Now, look at the ubiquity involved there. Right? You've got different connections plugged into that device by virtue of them all being different: wireless, fiber, some copper, some coax, right? You're building ubiquity into your WAN at that point, right, where you didn't have it before. Now you've got different types of service and carriers that your SD-WAN is going over at the same time by virtue of this unique tunneling that SD-WAN brings to the table. And so you've got a lot of protection and ubiquity on the front end, right, of your SD-WAN by virtue of this edge. I would say you can consider the SD-WAN underlay a road. Yeah, I think that's a good concept. Consider it a road, if you will. So when we go into the concept of the overlay, right, you consider, if the underlay is the road, then you can consider the overlay as the car that drives on the road, right? The car gets things to and from. It's sort of like the thing that, that gets, the underlay is there, the road's there, but what good is the road if there's nothing to ride over it, right? So the overlay is the construct of SD-WAN that builds itself over the underlay, which is why it's called an overlay. I'm probably confusing a lot of people at this point. So we can consider the overlay the car if the underlay is the road. So gee whiz, well, what do we consider the tunnel, right? So the tunnel should not be confused with the overlay, right? Because a tunnel is that thing that is a cost component, right? It's the cost component of SD-WAN, and it is also that thing that has all the magic of VMware SD-WAN in it, right? It has all the magic, all of the things that we talked about earlier: link remediation, forward error correction, all that fancy language, right? And all those things that are in place to help your WAN operate at its optimalness, right, are in that tunnel, right? And that's what the tunnel is. That's that endemic, that paid for part of the SD-WAN solution, right? That we scale in size based on application, right? So don't confuse it with the overlay. It's a tunnel. So if the underlay is the road, the overlay is the car, what do you think the tunnel is? I would say the tunnel are the people in the car, right? The tunnel are the people in the car, because they're carrying all the valuable information, right, about the networks, the sources and destinations of all the networks that they need to get to. They have the information in their heads, right? So I would say the tunnel could be considered the people in the car. Hopefully this analogy is working for you guys. Now, SD-WAN, the SD-WAN orchestrator allows you to configure what are called business policy rules. Now, the business policy matches parameters such as the IP address, ports, VLANs, IDs, interfaces, domain names, protocols, anything, right? Everything. Differential services, code point tags, right? So that when a data packet matches those conditions, the associated pre-configured action or actions are taken, right? So what that means is that, hey, I can go into my VMware, I go into my orchestrator, I can configure policies, right, that dictate how particular traffic is treated. It's out of my network and into the WAN, right? That's pretty powerful. And in this next, I'm going to show you an example of what that looks like within the graphical user interface, which is called the orchestrator, right, where you control all these policies. But this is where you build it, and you can see the granularity here for my network geeks out there, right? You can give the rule a name, and then you have match and actions, right? You have match and action sections within the business policy. And I don't know if you guys can read that or not, but the match section gives you source and destination, right? Options, right? And you can configure that within the match, right? And then you can see there's IP address, site prefix, domain name, protocol, ports, and application, right? You can actually use the application drop down right there to choose, any application. You can define the applications that you're looking to create the policy for. Then below that, you see the action section, right? So then what you do is you create an action, and that action could be anything. You give it an action a priority. How high on the list is it going to be in the list of other actions in other policies that I have in my business policy? You give it a priority, right? And then you give it a network service. Now, the network service is a really keen way of saying SD-WAN magic, no SD-WAN magic, right? Direct and multipath are those terms that a lot of us have probably heard before, especially in Mike Chase's SD-WAN boot camps, aka Dr. Cloud. The terms here for the actions in business policy mean two things. Well, actually, there are three settings there: direct, multipath, and internet backhaul. Direct simply means that you are sending the traffic out through the IP address of the carrier, one of the carriers that you have connected to the box. You're not sending it through the SD-WAN tunnel, right? You're not. Now, there are a lot of benefits to that and the ability to be able to do that. You may have applications that need to go out direct, right? Because we know that the SD-WAN tunnel does not have to be sized, right, to meet the total WAN size. It doesn't have to be sized that way. You can size your tunnel based on what you need, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But I want you guys to keep that in mind. So direct means sending out through the underlying ISP connected to the box or one of them, and then multipath means sending that traffic through the SD-WAN enhanced tunnel, right? Where you take advantage of all those bells and whistles and all that fun stuff we talked about earlier. The tertiary option you see there, internet backhaul, is you might say, hey, I might want to send this traffic to another node or destination on my SD-WAN. Right? You may want to send it back, right, to one of your primary locations based on the match rule, right, for whatever reason. It could be for failover or whatever else. And then you see the link steering. So I wanted to make sure that you guys had a good, clear understanding of what the business policy is, because a lot of people say that the business policy is the SD-WAN, right? That's where a lot of the intelligence coming from your network is realized by the SD-WAN. That's the first place that you dictate to the SD-WAN, here's how I want my stuff to go, right? And then there's a whole bunch of back-end intelligence and big data analytics that occur once that traffic starts to flow, right? And then that's where a lot of the intelligence occurs. But business policy is huge. It is huge, and it is relatively simple to use. And again, this is one of those components within the orchestrator, within the SD-WAN solution that AireSpring sells, that we assist you with creating and building. So there's no need to fear. AireSpring Solutions engineers are here to help with that. All right, so private IP SD-WAN, another concept I want you guys to sort of focus on. When you think of SD-WAN, you really need to think of SD-WAN, and again, I'm focusing on the Devereaux cloud architecture. You really have to think of SD-WAN as a book-ended solution, right? SD-WAN does not exist where there is not another SD-WAN device, right? So The three destinations of SD-WAN should be considered between edges, because that's where SD-WAN exists, right? Between edges, and then between the edge and the gateways, edges and gateways. That's also where SD-WAN can exist, right? Because they're between SD-WAN components, right? Now, the tertiary destination for it's not for SD-WAN, but it's where traffic can be destined to off of an SD-WAN, right, or it's to the internet, right, or to what I referred to earlier, a non-SD-WAN destination, or NSD. But what I want you to focus on in this graphic is the second one, the the edge to gateway, because that's where a lot of the magic occurs. And as I mentioned before, that is where the gateway can then offload, right, your SD-WAN traffic to those sanctioned SaaS destinations and beyond, and again to the AireSpring services. So focus on that one for a second. I'm going to talk about the public IP capability now of SD-WAN. So this is somewhat of a different picture, but I'm still emphasizing the gateway, right? The connectivity between the edge and the gateway. Earlier, we talked about how when the edge is connected to its connections, right? As soon as you plug it in, what does it do? It starts doing bandwidth tests, right? It starts doing all these different things, but it does that by virtue of connecting and seeking out and connecting to its mother, right? Or the gateway. Remember, the gateway is that topology route, right? It says it's where the topology for the SD-WAN that edge is a part of exists. And so that is where the edge always goes to seek out its information. What am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to connect to? Where am I supposed to go, right? And that's where it does. Now, I've spoken earlier about how SD-WAN has taken a lot of the services that ran on individual devices, and it basically exploded those services into a fabric, right, which exists now on the majority of the internet. Those edges, or those gateways, I'm sorry, those gateways exist in all of your major pops and right up next to your major cloud destinations, right? They are everywhere, right? So you can imagine the ubiquity that fabric represents. So that when you plug in your gateway, the first thing it does is it goes and it looks for the nearest gateway, right? And now that tunnel that is built between the edge and the gateway, we make use of, right? That tunnel, that enhanced tunnel, we make use of, and we bind a public IP address, right, to the public side of the gateway on that tunnel, and we also bind that to the WAN side of the SD-WAN edge of the edge appliance, right? So whenever that SD-WAN appliance is plugged into an ISP, it seeks out its gateway, and that tunnel is connected, and then those public IP addresses are now available to you. So what you should see is the magic in that sequence of events. There's a hurricane coming up the coast of Florida, I believe, this week, and a lot of the owners of the company exist there, and I think they all have SD-WAN. By virtue of having SD-WAN, they can pick up that box and they can go to a completely different country if they wanted to, plug that box into completely different ISPs, have that tunnel come up again, right? Have that public IP address block come up again, right? And their IPs follow them, right? We call that IP mobility. And AireSpring was one of the first carriers to actually do that. And I believe that was actually something that was sort of brought to the table by Mike Chase, as he had, the entomology can be kludgy, but that's what I heard. I'm sticking to that. And then a lot of folks looked at that and said, we should hop on that wagon too. And so, a lot of folks are doing the same thing, but that was something that AireSpring brought to the table initially. Now, think about what that means. I can take this box and my IP address can follow me now, right? Remember before, when you would get an IP address from an ISP, and when you left that ISP, what happened? You had to leave that IP address behind too, right? IP addresses cannot follow anything but the circuit, because that's what they're associated with, right? Same ISP, maybe they can bring that IP up again on another circuit, right? If it's on the same subnet block and blah 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 blah, right? No more of those difficulties, Now, utilizing AireSpring public IP or IP mobility, that IP address now follows you, right? So that means IP stability, IP mobility, and IP independence, right? Stability, same IP address, multiple carriers. Because you have multiple paths, right, for that IP address to find itself and find its way out to the internet, that's the stability. Regardless of which connection goes down, it will use the other one, and then you have all these other remediation techniques to help stabilize any conditions on single link connections, right? Same IP, multiple carrier, right? That's IP stability. IP mobility, your IP follows the box, right? No matter where you go, you're going to have that AireSpring public IP address follow you, and it's going to be with you. It's powerful. And then IP independence. And one of my guys, Melvin Frederick, who is just probably the greatest SD-WAN guy I've ever met, said no. IP independence is a great part of this solution as well, or benefit. It means no carrier lock, right? You're not locked down to the carrier now. You can take your IP address and take it wherever you want your box to go, right? So no carrier lock. Huge benefits, right? And hopefully I emphasize those well, but huge benefits to AireSpring IP and IP mobility, right? That's a huge one. SD-WAN licensing. And we're probably running short on time, so I'm going to sort of speed through this, but this is very important. As salespeople, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot of us on this call, and hey, look, I may be an engineer, but I've carried a bag before, and I understand the difficulties of selling products, right? I get it. And even as an engineer, I still have to sell these things. But this is where the rubber meets the road for a lot of us. Like, when I'm sitting down, I'm at my tools, and I'm trying to create that proposal, right, for the customer. What am I doing? What am I doing? Right? So I want you guys to think about when you're licensing, when you're trying to scale and cost out an SD-WAN solution, that you consider these three components and the fact that they all scale interdependently of each other, right? Based on the hardware that you choose. What I mean by that is that the edge hardware always comes in smaller, right, edges, and then they go all the way up to bigger edges, right? That makes sense, right? You have small needs, businesses with small needs, businesses with big needs, right? And you have different edge hardware to accommodate the I/O requirements of those scales, right? But then each one of those edges have a scale of tunnel speeds, and then a separate scale of gateway speeds, right? And that's because the edges are hardware. They have limited resources, and so they can support a limited amount of WAN throughput, and then supported tunnel, right? So you have to consider that the tunnel that you're going to cost out in your solution has a lot to do with the edge hardware that you choose. So you always want to start with the edge hardware, right? Edge hardware, then the tunnel that you're going to require, and then the gateway. Again, these are all three cost components that scale interdependently with each other, depending on which edge hardware you choose. So you want to take that into consideration when you're licensing things. The gateway is something that everybody has a question about. Hopefully I'll answer that for you in a second as far as licensing. So the edge hardware. So we as engineers, we normally size the edge hardware, or the VCE, Velo Cloud Edge, right? Because again, we're talking exclusively from the standpoint of the Velo Cloud architecture. So it can be cumulatively handled the bandwidth of all circuits go into it. So what do we mean? So if you take a Velo Cloud 620, an Edge 620, it's a model, it's a desktop model of SD-WAN, the Velo Cloud SD-WAN Edge hardware. It supports a total aggregate WAN throughput of 1.5 gigs, right? So if you were going to connect loops to that thing, right, it can support an overall aggregate combined bandwidth of all loops of 1.5 gig, right? Okay, great. Now, what that is that's a theoretical maximum of network traffic the box can process, right? And it should not be exceeded. It's hardware. It has a limit for a reason. Do not exceed. And then other considerations when sizing the hardware, as I said before, are the tunnel license that it can support, right? The size of that tunnel license. And then the I/O options, guys, the input output options, WAN LAN, right? This device is going, okay, I have copper on the LAN side and I got copper on the WAN side. You can't bring a fiber WAN connection to the box. You can't. So you have to, these things that are required for the edge are, they're considerations before you even have the edge. You don't size the edge based on those, you size the edge based on those considerations, not the other way around, right? You don't want to do a cart before the horse sort of building thing, which some folks tend to do, and it's not advised. And sizing edge hardware. So when you put it all together, right, as far as sizing the edge of the edge hardware, you want to choose the VMware Edge based on its I/O speeds and feeds. What do you need on the WAN side, and what do you need on the LAN side? That's information that's brought to the table, right? You don't use the edge to decide that. I repeat, you do not use the edge to decide that. Then you go by the WAN max throughput, as we discussed before. How much can this edge even support, right? And I don't want to exceed that theoretical maximum with the loops I plug into it. I just don't want to do that. Rule of thumb. And then you consider the SD-WAN enhanced tunnel throughput, because every single edge has a theoretical maximum of tunnel that they can support. Because remember, that tunnel is created by software running on the edge, right? And whenever different services invoke themselves in hardware, the hardware, it has to do more work. And so hardware has a limited resources to deliver to the software. And so that's why these things have limited capabilities on both ends, right? The maximum WAN input and the tunnel speed. We just have to take these into consideration based on the application. The application comes first, right? What does it need? So the SD-WAN tunnel size it should be considered a subset of the overall traffic, right? Applications and everything that's going through the VCE that we want to enhance with SD-WAN capabilities, right? Remember, I was talking about the SD-WAN tunnel is the thing that you get all those benefits from, right? So when you're sizing that tunnel out, you're thinking, what do I want to get, link remediation? What do I want to be able to do this? What do I want to be able to do that, right? You have to consider the important traffic that you want to send through, right, through your SD-WAN, right? And you size that tunnel, right, based on the application, right? You size that based on the application as well. It's important to realize that you size, again, you size the tunnel based on the applications that you want to protect, right? You don't necessarily size the tunnel based on the aggregate size of all the WAN connections that you have plugged into it. You don't have to do that. You can size the tunnel based on the size, right, of the applications, right, the bandwidth that you need to protect the applications that you're looking to protect. And hopefully that made some sense there. So it's important to know that that there are applications out there, guys, that are symmetrical and asymmetrical, right? These are the apps themselves, have nothing to do with the network. It's the applications that are built that way. Real-time applications like voice and video require symmetricality, meaning that the upload speed of the loop should be in lockstep with the download speed. You guys have seen those 10 by 10, 100 by 100, gig by gig, right? Those are symmetrical bandwidths. And the applications, we're talking about the difference between the loop and the applications, right? So keep that in mind. Symmetrical applications like voice and video, real-time applications require symmetricality, right? But there are some applications that are not, right? You don't necessarily have to make those considerations on the loop. So what do we mean, right? So what is that relevant to sizing your tunnel, right? So if you're going to size a tunnel, right? If you're going to size the amount of, or I'm sorry, the VCE, or the size of the VCE that you're going to need. And I know this says tunnel, but it's actually sizing the VCE. I apologize for that. And you need to take a look at the asymmetricality or the symmetricality of the loops that you're considering. Now, what we do as SEs is that we normally take a look at the largest direction, right, of the loops, and then we'll add those all together, right? To get an idea of the SD-WAN of the VCE that's required, right? So think about it like this: if you're trying to size in the previous example, we were talking about a 620 supports 1.5 gig of aggregate WAN throughput, but a gig of tunnel, right? So in that example, I would not want to exceed, right, the maximum theoretical throughput of that device, right? And this is how you can figure that out by using the um, the, the 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 greater direction of a particular loop, right, and taking that into consideration when you're sizing your VCE. And hopefully that made sense. Now, there are other applications such as data, which is symmetrical. Now, I know when we think about this, we're at our computers and we're looking at a website and we hit click, right? That click did not require all that megabytes, right? It is literally a input device, input device instruction, and some HTML code going up to the web server or whatever it is that you're looking to pull down. It's in the direction of down, right, where all of the fervor comes into play, right? Because you're pulling all that information down, right? So that's pretty much where asymmetricality came from. It is not a capability of a loop. And I know my guys are probably going, ooh, especially Chuck. Smile for me, Chuck. But it's a product, right? A lot of these technologies, Ethernet, coax, fiber, all of these things they're symmetrical. They're symmetrical products, right? They can go up the same in the same speed they come down, right? These are products, right? In order to save impact on ISP networks, and also to deliver products to customers that better suit the end user's needs, right? So these asymmetrical solutions, bandwidth solutions, are really productizing, right? Productizing bandwidth, not necessarily the capability of the medium. So you should consider that whenever you're buying bandwidth for your SD-WAN, consider asymmetricality. It may be attractive to buy loops like that, but in your critical business needs, you're probably trying to stay with symmetrical loops if you can help it. Now we come to the gateway licensing. So we talked about the edge, right? Sizing that edge appliance, that hardware, input, output, right? Speeds and feeds. We talked about the tunnel licensing, right? And sizing that relative to the size of the bandwidth that you need to protect the applications that you're looking to protect, right? Now we're talking about the AireSpring gateway. Now, gateway traffic we talked about earlier occurs when the edge or any SD-WAN component wants to send traffic to a non-SD-WAN destination, right? The gateway is the sanctioned component of SD-WAN that is the off-ramp, right? And gives the SD-WAN access to the many products and managed services offered by AireSpring and beyond. By using our multi-cloud connect service to reach Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, and other SaaS destinations. So the gateway is it's pretty much the door, right? It says, okay, you guys had fun in this room and now you want to go out to play, right? You went somewhere else, right? And it also lets you back in, right, into the SD-WAN as well. So you can see the importance of the gateway. That's where all the fun is, right? That's where the SD-WAN gets to all of those other things that the business may want to be able to reach. So in bundling everything up, at this point, we've got, when you're licensing SD-WAN for the sales folks, we want to consider the edge always, and the box size, max WAN throughput. And good God, guys, input output speeds and feeds. Those are equally important. Are we doing fiber on the WAN? Are we doing fiber on the LAN? Right? Then this box ain't gonna work, right? And using media converters and things in between them is not advised, right? Size the box based on max WAN throughput, tunnel, input output, speeds and feeds, right? The SD-WAN enhanced tunnel, right? You want to license size that for the max internal traffic, which is anything site to site or site to AireSpring or beyond, via our data center cloud, three-quarter protected internet, and more, right? And that pretty much is the license size for protecting that kind of traffic, or basically sending the traffic from the edge through the SD-WAN enhanced tunnel, right, to the gateway, right, and then out through the gateway, right? That's where all that stuff happens. And by virtue of a 3/4 protection and using the AireSpring IP, right, you get that 3/4 protection out to the internet. And then you have the AireSpring Gateway Access, or AGA, and that's for destinations. Again, that's the SD-WAN component, VeloCloud SD-WAN component, right, that gets the traffic off of the SD-WAN. It's that sanctioned component, right? That's what it's there for, outside of being a route reflector and topology and things like that for the edges, right? But it's also, again, where it's that sanctioned SD-WAN component that allows everything to get off of the SD-WAN and go to other destinations and places, and then also to get it back onto the SD-WAN as well. So it's your on and off ramp, so to speak. And you size that gateway, again, based on the application, right? It really is based on the application. How much bandwidth do you need, right? That's not a question that someone can answer and pull out of the air. These are questions that are answered by simple math and by gathering the information and doing the math, right? So that's how we size the SD-WAN solution: edge, enhanced tunnel, gateway license. Now, reporting is a huge deal. I wanted to bring up reporting because it's very important. And my guy Chuck loves reporting. He's like the guru of reporting, actually. Now, reporting is very important, especially now you've got this software-defined wide area networking, and it gives you the ability to glean so much, right, relative to the performance of this software-defined WAN that you've created, as well as, quite frankly, as well as the performance of the underlay, right, that you're using to build the SD-WAN upon. So you're getting a lot of information here. I can give you an example. I mean, I didn't actually use reporting. I had a problem with my Comcast connection, and they were saying that I was getting a gig up and a gig down. I looked at my the bandwidth, right, the bandwidth reporting on my orchestrator, and saw that I was only getting like 800 down, and it gave me 200 meg up, right? And so I used that to prove that to them, and trended that across weeks, months, right? And I got massive credits on my Comcast bill because of that, right? So there you go. So it just gives you the ability to glean so much about your network, and principals and parties that are interested within the enterprise, interested about these kinds of things, of how the WAN is performing, right, where they're spending their money at. These reports are an amazing way of giving them the warm and fuzzies about the things that they're buying, right? Outside of giving the administrator, the network administrator, the confidence to be able to see what's going on with their WAN, and then to make intelligent decisions about how to scale that WAN, right, where they didn't have before. Reporting is uber important. So we're coming down to the end of this, I believe. There are high availability options. So what would SD-WAN be? All that ubiquity on the back end of SD-WAN be if you couldn't have it on the front end, right, where the edge meets the road, right, where the edge meets the customer and local area network? There should also be some ubiquity there, right? There's also be some availability there, and of course we can do this. There are high availability options with all of the SD-WAN edge appliances that we sell. From the 5 series all the way up to the 3000 series, all have HA capabilities. And again, these are things that my team would help you with to construct and to create their design for and explain to the clients. But this particular one is a multi-box solution, and it's the one that we deploy when customers have multiple ISPs, and they're also looking to take advantage of both of those ISPs. They're looking for ISP redundancy as well as edge redundancy. And you'll see the 2 switches there, north and south. ISPs coming in, ISP router. That ISP connects to a layer 2 switch, and then that ISP connection is split. That switch is primarily there to split the ISP connection between the 2 VCEs, so that ISP is reachable from each of the VCEs, right? And so that's what those switches are there for. I know there's lots of questions about those switches and whether they're required or not. For this particular type of deployment, the answer is yes, they are required, and those switches should be provided and maintained by AireSpring, because they are WAN facing and they need to be locked down, right, to maintain the security and integrity of the SD-WAN solution. right? Because AireSpring's offering this solution of HA, we want to make sure that we're managing and administrating all of the elements to make it happen. So from the ISP router, we want to make sure that we're providing the split of the ISP connection to the VCEs. So those switches, yes, are required. Now the handoff to the local area network can and cannot be, LAN's customer provided switches, right? We really don't care about that side, I don't think, but we can also provide the switches as well. But again, those WAN facing switches are crucial and important to the overall design of an HA solution. And also maintaining its security, again, because those WAN switches are publicly facing. And then we have another solution, which basically doesn't give each edge availability to each one of the ISPs, because you're not splitting the connection or the IP addresses coming from those IPs between each one of the VeloCloud edges, or VMware edges, I'm sorry. But what this does is it gives you hardware redundancy. So when one of the ISP fails, if the standby VCE doesn't sense the heartbeat from the active VCE, it'll then take over, right? It'll then take over the traffic from the local area network and then send that over the available ISP2. So in this solution, you can see you're not taking advantage of both ISPs, right? But it is also another solution. It's called our switchless SD-WAN failover. So I'm going to wrap this up here. I'm pretty sure Ellen going, yay, by saying that and reminding everyone that SD-WAN is a bookended solution. SD-WAN only exists between SD-WAN components, right? SD-WAN to another destination is called non-SD-WAN destinations, or NSDs, and can be accommodated from the SD-WAN using technologies like VPNs, right? Like IPsec VPN. You can use those as a way of off-ramping, right, from your SD-WAN. But for the most part, when you're thinking about that SD-WAN magic, when you're thinking about that, all those terms that you've heard us talk about, dynamic multi-point optimization, link remediation, and all those different things, it's a bookended solution. SD-WAN magic exists between SD-WAN components, but integrates easily with non-SD-WAN destinations. So with that, I think that was the last slide, Ellen.
I believe so.
Yeah.
It's time for some questions. Well, that was, yeah, good job, Clinton.
Well, thank you. Good job on the slide deck and everything, and putting this all together. I mean, without you, I don't happen.
Okay, well, we had some good writing questions while you were talking.
Awesome.
And I'm going to start with, let's see. Okay, this is a clarification on the orchestrator and business policies. Do business policies automate the generation of orchestration rules?
Yes, they do. They do automate exactly. What you're doing is when you're building the business policy, you're then thereby creating the automation. So if you're asking, are business policies created in an automated fashion, using big data analytics, the answer is not initially, but those big data analytics are then used are used after the fact to help accentuate the performance of your SD-WAN.
Okay, good.
Hopefully that
All
answers
right.
the question.
Okay, we have a couple more writing questions, and we'll get through those, and then we'll open up the lines. Okay, this is one I know that you'll like, and again, it's particular to VMware, I'm pretty sure. Can you explain how a VoIP call does not drop if a leg of SD-WAN goes down?
Yep. So earlier when we were talking about how SD-WAN, there's a concept of dynamic multipath optimization, DMPO, and that's that magic sauce. That's that secret sauce that VeloCloud created behind the scenes that gives SD-WAN its magic. So by virtue of DMPO, how this works from a very high level is that the VeloCloud Edge is actually creating tunnels, right? It is creating real-time tunnels, right, across each one of the links connected to the box, right? So Comcast, AT&T, and Sprint, it has a tunnel over each one of those connections already, right? So that if one of those connections does have an issue, the tunnel to the destination right, that initial flow already had going exists across those other connections as well, right? So when that particular connection is, has issues, brownouts or weather, right? The VCE instructs that traffic to go over the next available tunnel that was created over the secondary path, right? And this happens, and because there's no state table being broken, right? IP addresses aren't changing, right? That's the sauce, right? That's how it happens in a split second. That's how real-time applications like voice, like video, don't take a hit, or as you've heard before, it's considered hitless failover. Hopefully that explained that thing to you.
So you need multiple connectivity actually into the box to have the failover, or can you do it with one circuit?
Nope, you have to do it. You need multiple connections, absolutely, and that is the thing that we were talking about in terms of like link remediation, right? That ubiquity that was built on the back end of SD-WAN, right? How all these gateways, right, and all these other components of SD-WAN were spread across the internet, right? I'm talking, if VMware has gateways like literally all over the world. I could show you a map of it, and it would blow your mind of where all these things exist, right? So by virtue of that fabric, those tunnels um, exist similarly, across the same fabric. So you got all that. You got all that. Yeah, I almost lost my train of thought there. So you got all that fabric, and you got that ubiquity built on the back end. It just made sense that VeloCloud would build that on the front end and take advantage of the multiple links that are plugged into the edge, right, to do that with. So yeah, you need multiple links. Because if you think about it, if a single link fails, if that underlay, if you have a single loop going into that edge, that's the underlay that the tunnel's building itself upon, right? Right, and remember, the underlay is that path, is that road that's required between SD-WAN components in order for SD-WAN to build itself upon, right? So if any of the underlay is compromised, you got a single loop, then yeah, that tunnel is going to fail, right? Because it has no construct to build upon. But see, that's the power of SD-WAN. You can use multiple loops. You can not only can you use when I say loop, I mean anything, wireless internet connectivity, right? Think about that. So you can build the ubiquity into your SD-WAN solution, right? And make that question moot.
Okay. All right. We've got two more questions from the gentleman asked the earlier question. So, okay, here's a situation. Let's jump to this one first. Please clarify three-quarter protection or three-quarter protected internet.
Three-quarter protected internet. Well,
Yeah.
remember when we were talking about earlier about the AireSpring gateway, right? And how that AireSpring gateway is what the edge uses to build a that SD-WAN enhanced tunnel, right? That SD-WAN enhanced tunnel up to and out through to the internet, right? Because ultimately, if traffic is being sent, when I said those three destinations of SD-WAN, remember, between edge and gateway, and then out to the internet. But remember, if you want SD-WAN to remain enhanced, right, it's got to be enhanced between SD-WAN components, right? So when an edge is sending traffic through the protected tunnel, right, up to the gateway, right, and then out to the internet, voila, three-quarter protection. You have a path to the internet for applications that is hop minimized, single hop in most cases, right? And applications will, they gravitate towards that, right? They see that benefit and love it. So that's pretty much the description of three-quarter protection in a nutshell. And hopefully that helped to paint the picture for you.
Okay, great. Okay, next question. If two companies using separate AireSpring SD-WANs have traffic between their SD-WANs, is that charged as outside traffic?
And they have traffic between their SD-WANs. Is that
Mm-hmm.
considered outside traffic? Well, I would say yes. It's called, that destination for between each software-defined network will be considered non-SD-WAN destinations. Even though you have SD-WAN components on the other end, it could be, a different SD-WAN architecture altogether. You could be trying to, federate, somehow federate using a VPN, trying to federate, Fortinet SD-WAN with VMware SD-WAN. So you're talking about two
Mm,
essentially relatively different architectures there. But for the most part, I'm not saying it's not impossible, right? But you can do that. Right, you can do that, but yeah. So that destination, if you're looking at each SD-WAN would look at each other as a non-SD-WAN destination. Yes.
mm. Okay, interesting. Okay, next question. Okay, this one involves a firewall. So where
Okay.
does the firewall fit in? If you have a VeloCloud Edge, would they connect to the firewall instead of a LAN switch?
Well, the way you can architect your security relative to your SD-WAN is many. Remember, the SD-WAN you have the gateway solution, right? And remember when I showed that cloud, AireSpring sells, network-based firewall services, right? So when you're talking about placement of a firewall, there are virtual services that you can buy because you have a virtual SD-WAN to secure your SD-WAN out to the internet if you wanted to. So but for the most part, yes, you could take if you're thinking about the way that traffic comes into your LAN, let's say right to left, you got your ISP. ISP hits his CPE, then that CPE is going into your VeloCloud Edge or your VMware Edge. Um, and then, yes, at that point, the VeloCloud Edge is then being used for its functionality. It's link aggregating, it's doing all its things, and then you would want to then use connect the VeloCloud Edge to the perimeter, right, of your local area network, which in most cases is a firewall. Yeah, so it would be a right to left would be a VeloCloud Edge, and then customer firewall.
Okay, good. I know we're at the top of the hour, a little bit past. Some people have left, but I'm going to keep going. This is a question. So the gentleman's asking, is there a problem for IT managers who are managing the SD-WAN? If they get a load of alerts, does that create a hassle for them to address all these alert messages?
No, it doesn't, because the orchestrator really gives you a way of managing all of that. You can aggregate all those messages into a common report, and then you can share it, with principals and network engineers that are responsible for co-managing the network with you, or then you can take all that information and consolidate it for yourself. Again, all that information is in one portal. It's not an overwhelming portal. Again, I have it at home. It's not an overwhelming. When the alarms come in,
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
yeah, it's not an overwhelming scenario for me at all, and that's just my personal use. Um, yeah,
All right. Well, maybe they've got other problems that
maybe.
SD-WAN can't address if things like that, if the bells and whistles and lights are going off. Okay, here's an interesting question. We'll take this one, then maybe we'll open up lines. Okay, so if a partner has a customer who doesn't disclose the bandwidth and throughput that they need, or that the customer or what the customer provided in their circuit. Let me read this again. So what happens when a customer does not disclose the bandwidth and throughput of a customer provided circuit that is connected to the edge, the VeloCloud Edge, and it exceeds the maximum throughput allowance, that 1.5, whatever it was, megabytes per second you cited before. What are some
Yeah.
of the service issues that would cause? Would AireSpring be notified of that? Would the customer be notified of that?
Yeah, there are different areas within the orchestrator that can identify dropped queues, and would give you indication of a box having performance issues, because it was undersized. I'm sorry. And yeah, so you would
Mm,
definitely get some red lights and some alerts and alarms within the orchestrator. Probably particularly and I think the way that the edge would react to those things, is that it would react to them in the way that a router would, right? We assume that this SD-WAN edge, because of a lot of the magic that was built into it, that it treats traffic outside of the SD-WAN enhanced tunnel. It treats traffic just like any router would, right? So the question is, well, what would a router do, right? If you oversubscribe a router, routers have a limited amount of throughput. What happens? Well, it drops packets, right? Retransmits. There's all kinds of networking anomalies that occur, but ultimately what happens is that a lot of people start complaining, right? And there's a lot of red lights and lines in your in your NMS and in your orchestrator portal that you're going to have to address, right? So, again, I understand that getting this information sometimes can be problematic and difficult, right? But again, these are you're trying to size something, and it behooves us to make sure that we get the numbers that are required to size these things. Otherwise, you've sold something to a customer now that's having performance issues, right? Do we want to do that, or do we
Yeah.
want to try to get the information, right? That we just want to get the information, and it exists. It's either through the carrier or somewhere. Maybe they can do a speed test, or something like that. Who knows? But there's ways of getting the information, and I suggest that you get the AireSpring Solutions engineering team on the phone with that end user to help try to find some ways of getting that information, because otherwise you could be undersizing the box and causing problems that you just don't want to deal with later on.
Yeah. Are there a couple of standard questions we could put together for people that they should ask their customers when they get in this situation to
Yeah,
prevent something like this from happening?
yeah,
Maybe we can do
absolutely.
that.
And we go over this a lot with the channel managers, and I think they have a pretty good idea of the questions to ask. But again, through the course of the training, I was mentioning a lot of that, right? You really have to take a look at what is going to exist on both sides of that edge, right? What are you trying to do? What's the application you're trying to create, right? And now the edge has nothing to do with that, right? You're going to call on the edge to meet the demands of the application, but the edge doesn't know what you're thinking, right? We have to understand what it is you're doing on each side, right? What speeds and feeds do you require coming from the WAN? What are we plugging into it, right? From the WAN side, what speeds and feeds and options do we have on the LAN side, right? You may have
Mhm.
fiber, you may have copper, you may have, God forbid, some deprecated LAN protocol working on the LAN. Who knows, right? But that box has to have those considerations in mind. And I'm pretty sure if there are any channel managers on here that are listening, they go, "Oh yeah, we know that one well, right?" How many times
Yeah.
have you sold a box and it didn't have copper, right? It didn't have, sorry, fiber on the WAN side, right? It didn't have fiber optic or SFP options, right? And there's fiber on both sides. Problem. So,
So early days
yep.
were an adventure. Okay, I'm just going. I'll do this last quick question, and Dan is asking if we have any short explainer videos. Dan, we actually do have 2 explainer videos about AireSpring Managed SD-WAN. They're both on our YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube and search under AireSpring, you'll find our channel and click on videos. There's one about domestic SD-WAN, if you will, or general SD-WAN. And then we have one about the global managed SD-WAN, and those are good to show customers, even non-technical people or CIOs, if you want to get their attention. If you want to reach out to me later on, I can tell you more about that. So I know we're running late. We still have about 46 people on the line. I can unmute people or give you the ability to unmute yourself if you want to ask any more questions. Basically right now, folks, if you see a red microphone to the left of your name, if you click on that and turn it from red to green, we should be able to hear you. You can ask Clinton a question on the phone lines.
Shoot.
Anybody have a question for Clinton?
Come on, guys. I don't bite.
I have a question if you have time.
Sure.
Sure. Yep.
On Mike Chase's 4-hour boot camp, it was like, a fire arrow was hitting you in the head. But he went over several times the quote unquote AireSpring secret sauce, basically suggesting that they have it, but you can't get it directly from VMware because VMware isn't a carrier. And that was, he went on and on about the dedicated IP, so you could move this whole application from one location to another, or when it failed over from one ISP WAN to another, you wouldn't have to worry about the IP changing. I don't think I heard that in this shorter non-boot camp. If you can, is that really a thing? Is it just in Mike's brain, or is that something that the non-technical salespeople like myself are able to really pitch to end users as, hey, AireSpring has this and nobody else does?
Well, yeah, it is absolutely. It wasn't smoke. Mike talks fast, but he's honest. It was not smoke, and it definitely is something that we can provide. And I've spoken about this earlier about IP mobility, right? And I talked about how the AireSpring IP addresses can be bound to the WAN side of the box, so that they follow that box, no matter where that box is placed, and no matter
Yeah,
which
this is down
ISPs,
here,
exactly
right
which
here.
underlying
Yep.
ISP. Yeah, exactly. But I probably went over it too quickly. But you raised another interesting point about copycats, right? Now you've all heard, Mike Chase is very verbose, and I love him to death. I've learned so much, right? But you hear him talk about his, the fact that if you caught, so he's on the technical advisory board for VMware, for VeloCloud, right? Yes, he's on that board. None of I don't think any of our competitors can say the same thing. That they have an engineer, right? One of their principal engineers working on that has that sort of insight. And Mike Chase was the one that found that ability, right? The ability for IP mobility, where the IP address follows you. There have been some copycats. There have been some copycats. I won't name them, but up until this point, it has been exclusively an AireSpring thing, right? But there are some copycats out there trying to figure it out. I don't think they do it as well as we do, but we'll see.
So as a follow-up, um, I mean, it's to explain to an end user customer the concept of this IP mobility, and while others might have copied it, they didn't copy it very well, and you still do it best. Do you have like a one-page PDF that explains that? So if we're saying, okay, these are your different options, but if you really want the IP mobility, you have to go with AireSpring VMware.
Yeah. I'm not sure if there's a one pager for that, but hey, you've got the SVP of marketing on the phone here too,
Okay.
listening
Pull
in.
something together. If you get your, if you get your now don't we sell the IP addresses, Clinton, to
Yes,
our
we do.
clients?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
we
mean, if you get
provide.
your IP address from us for your box,
Yeah,
I mean, it stays with the box, Dan.
right.
So,
Yeah, yeah. You do
and
get that.
Nike likes to use the example of the partner that was living in Florida, got tired of the hurricanes,
Right.
and moved to Brazil. He went to Brazil, plugged it in. Everything was just as it was when he was back in Florida. There were no disruptions. Nothing dropped. Everything was because it's tied to the box, as Clinton was explaining earlier.
Yep.
Right, and Clinton, I guess the key phrase there is it's bound to the WAN side of the box.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Whatever it is, /30/29, exactly. And then you can extend those IPs in that net block up to your firewall, right? So when you do that, listen carefully. When you do that, right, you are creating a sort of like a relationship between now the state table and that firewall and the SD-WAN tunnel, right? And you are now giving sort of the ability, right, of the traffic coming through that firewall now, right, the ability to take advantage of those enhanced SD-WAN services as well, right? So so when you get that AireSpring public IP and you get that IP mobility, yeah, it follows the box. You use that to build your LAN with, right? You put that on the WAN interface. Put an IP address from that net block on the WAN interface of your firewall, and you're off to the races, right? It's following you, so that when traffic coming through that firewall, then it's able to take advantage of the stateful failover, I'm sorry, in the SD-WAN tunnel. Make
All right,
sense?
so just barely, but I did get certified by AireSpring on SD-WAN from the boot camp, so I must
All right.
understand it.
We'll pull your
So
card.
Ellen, let me ask you this. If I want to do like, email blast to my prospect database and kind of put together my own one pager so I can drive in some, quality leads on this, I would imagine I could, present my content to you, Ellen, and you could share it with your team. And then that could get approved that way, so I don't misspeak what I think I heard on this webinar and the last one.
Yeah, I'm happy to help you with that, Dan. In fact, we even had a couple email campaigns that we were circulating off and on over the years. I can, send me an email to remind me, and I
Sure.
can show you what we were sending out, and then you can maybe add your own ideas to it, and then we can look at it together, and then I can do a sanity check with the engineers just to make sure we haven't said anything that it doesn't apply.
Yeah, good point. I mean, we should be accentuating that value more than I think that we have. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, that'd be great, because I mean, there's a lot of providers out there that do the VMware Velo Cloud Box. I sold a huge application for SpectraTel, but it fell apart after 3 years, and their engineers couldn't fix it, and they all decided, Velo agreed that it was their problem. But
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to do it again with other clients, but not run into problems like I did.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think I guess to really round this out, the reason why that is the case in most instances is because those vendors do not run and own their own gateways, right? When I was talking about earlier about how Velo Cloud basically has spread the fabric of SD-WAN across the diaspora of the internet, right? It's all everywhere, and all those major data centers and everywhere. It's everywhere, right? Those gateways exist. Those are public gateways, right? Those are public gateways, and they don't have the same capability because the vendor that's selling the SD-WAN boxes, right, don't have visibility into those gateways, and they cannot create the services that the custom services, right, that AireSpring has created by running its own gateways. So that's the icing on the cake there.
Right, SpectraTel, they're switchless, and with Mike being on VMware's board, that would certainly, or whatever he's on, that would be a competitive advantage to pitch AireSpring over SpectraTel.
Yep, he's on the board of technology. Yep.
Board of technology.
Yeah, sounds like we got some catching up to do, Dan. Okay, so I want to give people a chance to, if there's any other questions that you need to ask Clinton before we go. I unfortunately have a hard stop at 30 minutes past the hour. So any other questions for Clinton? Turn your microphone from red to green and you'll be able to ask a question.
Yes, hi, this is William Cortez from Athenium Technology. I wanted to first thank Clinton here for the awesome presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
My question might fall a little bit off topic, from this, but kind of looking beyond the managed cloud firewall solution. Is there anything in the roadmap ahead for AireSpring to, offer, more like security-based offerings like CASB or ZTNA?
I love you. I'm secure, so I could say that. Yes. Major roadmaps, and because I have the SVP of marketing on here, I'm not gonna say much, but yes, those things are on the roadmap. Yeah, cloud access brokers, right? Yeah, the SSE, Secure Service Edge. Yeah, and the pillars of that foundation leading into leading into SASE, right? So yeah, Secure Cloud Gateway, or we call it Cloud Gateway Security, CG, yeah, whatever.
Cloud and CWS Cloud Web Security.
Yeah.
We've been beta testing products, and William, and we eat our own dog food here at AireSpring. Our technical staff, I mean, we're talking about our network engineers, our solutions engineers, Mike himself. We have a lot of products we've been beta testing. When we're sure that those products are going to deliver what your clients need, we're going to release them.
Yeah.
But right now we're being darn sure that they do everything that they claim they do.
Yeah, I got to tell you this, and one last thing. I'm currently running Workspace ONE in the tunnel on the computer that I'm having this, hosting this on, this conference on right now, and it is amazing. Yeah, the remote browser isolation and all those features, just the on-demand VPN capability. I don't have to go in and pull up my VPN client and remember my password, and I can go to all of the destinations within AireSpring just by requesting them. The VPN's dynamic, and again, it just alleviates all of the complexity, right, and the silliness too around your standard VPNs. It is an amazing product. I'm demoing it to Ellen's point. I'm also demonstrating Edge Network Intelligence, which is the extension of SASE, and basically where SASE is going to be run from. But yeah, it is on the roadmap, well on the roadmap for you, for sure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any additional questions for us today, folks? Still got some people on the line. Thank you for hanging on as long as you have.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yep. Turn that microphone from red to green and we'll hear you. Maybe any other questions? If not, if those people still want to hear, we did have some company update slides. I know it's very late. If you think of something, send an email. It's clinton.devereaux@airspring.com or ellen.cahill@airspring.com, or even like sales at airspring.com.